So in 2002, Jeff and Jerry Jarrett will actually create a promotion known as Impact Wrestling slash TNA slash. I'm sure there's loads more I've completely forgot about there.
Yeah, the company's had about a dozen names at this point, but yeah, most people tend to know it as TNA, Total Nonstop Action Wrestling.
Of course. Now, despite obviously having some great moments, obviously throughout their history, they've also got some bad moments. So today's show is obviously a part of our highs and lows series. We've got loads to talk about, some news, and yeah, general chat. So as always, intern, roll the intro. And welcome to November 4th, 2023, episode 115 of The Magic of Wrestling. I'm, of course, the magician, Liam Wakeland.
Now, I will say there that you didn't spring the clock forward. You put the calendar backwards like a month.
That is correct. So normally it would be 6:30. It is now 5:30, but we're still here.
I am the effing expert. You guys know who I am, the American of the show. I am Mr. Isaacs.
Yeah, I've been saying it all week. I must remember the clocks have gone back. I must remember the clocks have gone back.
Fortunately for me, I don't actually have any clocks in the house. I just mostly use my phone, which updates on the mobile network. So like it kind of does the work for me.
Fair enough. I mean, of course, Crown Jewel's currently on. Is it on now as we speak?
It is. I have got it on my big screen here in front of me. So if there's anything noteworthy that happens, I'll mention it here. Seth Rollins just beat Drew McIntyre to retain the World Heavyweight Championship.
And that sentence alone is now ruined Crown Jewel for me.
Yep, he has retained. So it was a pretty good match, though, from what I saw, kind of just looking over my shoulder here.
Of course. And of course, Mr. Isaacs, I'm pretty know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Weekly catch-up, busy week?
Dude, there's never a time I'm not busy. Like, I am busy from sun up to sun down most days. It's one of those things that, I love unwinding and doing the shows, and I usually am kind of putting everything together on Saturday morning, whereas you put your stuff together like a week prior.
No,
I was lagging behind a little bit.
Can I just elaborate on that? I actually prepare everything for today's show Saturday morning, weirdly.
Yeah.
But yeah, we do obviously plan weeks ahead. It kind of works good in that way, because then if something comes up, we can easily move shows around. It's not a big issue.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm kind of a fly by the seat of my pants kind of guy anyway. So, I just kind of go with the flow. Whatever happens. Damian Priest is coming out with the Money in the Bank briefcase now. So I don't know if he's getting ready to wrestle Rollins or if some BS is going to happen here. But yeah, busy week, man.
Of course. So, yeah. So before we obviously get into our main event and talk about Impact Wrestling, let's get into some news, shall we? We always call it a segment, and I've completely forgot what it's called.
The Magic Weekly.
Now, of course, the Magic Weekly is brought to you by FTW Wrestling. Mr. Isaacs, tell everybody about this.
Fight the World Wrestling. Brian Idol and Natalia Markova of NWA fame and note run a wrestling school in Florida for $250 a month. Let's go ahead and roll that video package to show everybody.
Determination, perseverance. These are the qualities that make a champion. Do you have what it takes to be the next wrestling superstar? Are you ready to turn your dreams into a reality? At Fight the World Wrestling's World Wrestling Academy, we can help you become the champion you were meant to be. Our world travel trainers, Brian Idol and Natalia Markova, are well-known industry professionals with years of experience in the world of wrestling. From the basics to advanced techniques, they are dedicated to help give you the tools that you need to succeed in the ring. Our training program is tailored to challenge you, push you to your limits, and help you discover your full potential. Come join our diverse group of talent. Join us at Fight the World Wrestling's World Wrestling Academy and make your dream a reality. Visit our website or contact us to learn more and start your journey to the top today.
Today. Not tomorrow, not yesterday. Today, damn it.
There you go. So, what's been going on for us in the news this week? And the first thing I've got today is Kevin Sullivan was obviously on a recent episode of the Busted Open, and he says that the importance of developing the character. So this is what he actually said. He says, develop your character. You didn't have to do all the flip and flops and stuff. They thought you were the toughest man being walking the planet. Sullivan continued, I think Brock Lesnar did it the right way. So what do you think?
I absolutely agree with him. I think you should focus more on character and less on moves. You know, the moves are important, but if you've got all the moves in the world, but you have no character at all, and you look like a stick, you don't have any kind of physique of any kind, and you have no character, nobody's going to care about you outside of the hardcore nerds like us that watch everything. If you want to get that broad mainstream appeal, that's what you got to have. You got to have the aesthetics and you got to have character. You bring in the hardcores with the moves, you got the aesthetic and the character for everybody else.
Yeah, do you think, obviously, when it comes to character development, it's changed over the past, let's say, 20 years?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's gotten less important. For whatever reason, it's just less important to wrestlers now. They want to get in there, they want to get their shit in, do their flips and their flops and flippity flop and tope suicida and all that. And, you know, they don't focus on character development and mic skills and the little intangibles that are going to bring people in and keep them captivated to watch your program.
Yeah, I think that's a nice little example. I mean, when I think about it now, this modern day wrestling is all about, high flyers and stuff like that. But I feel like that's more to like AEW, New Japan. I don't know. I don't see it much in WWE, the high flying thing. I know obviously they do it, but I think that's more tailored, like to the powerhouses. Is that fair?
For the most part, yeah. I mean, like the opening match here at Crown Jewel was Sami Zayn against JD McDonough. And I mean, that's not too very physically, guys with a lot of physical stature, and they did a lot of kind of aerial moves and fast pace and that kind of stuff. So, I mean, you do see that, but I would say at the top level, the main event level, it's the old school muscle guys that mostly just throw punches and clotheslines.
Fair enough. So I'll move us swiftly on. And this week it was announced that Ric Flair obviously signed a multi-year deal with AEW. This has been met with a lot of confusion, a lot of anger. There's mixed feelings about this. What about you? What's your feelings?
You know, I'm a little indifferent on it personally, honestly. I think that, he'll probably help in some regard, whether he's doing promo work or whatever. I mean, maybe they'll have him manage Andrade. Because it appears that he's back in good graces with Charlotte again. I don't know, man. I'm a little indifferent to it. I hope they're not spending too much money on him. I did read a rumor that Woo Energy is going to be supplementing most of Flair's salary, which is kind of weird. It's like it's Flair paying himself, but I guess maybe his investors are helping with that. I hope he brings some value to the program. I'm sure he'll bring some value. Hopefully he won't stir up any controversy or anything like that. It is kind of funny, though, that a lot of people that, a lot of AEW diehards were like very adamant that, a year ago or whenever it was that Plane Ride from Hell episode came out, that Flair was a big bad monster and he should never be allowed near wrestling again. Well, now he's in AEW. So I'm kind of curious to see if everybody's going to change their tune now. But like I said, I'm a little indifferent on it. I mean, I hope he brings some value and I hope he keeps his nose clean.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of on point when you said keep his nose clean, but just for me personally as a fan, I can't work out what is going to bring, obviously, to the company. I mean, you've got the knowledge, you've got the stuff like that, but when you take that away, what really else can he provide in a way?
To show his face on camera and maybe cut a promo or two. I mean, that's basically it. It's just a nostalgia thing, so people can be like, hey, that Ric Flair's on TNT or TBS again, like that's like an old school thing because he was on TBS back in the 90s all the time. So yeah, I don't know. I hope he brings some value. I don't think he's going to do much. I think he'll be there for a cup of coffee and then he'll fizzle out and leave.
Yeah, I do believe it's obviously 2 years, so let's just obviously see what this next 2 years bring.
Well,
So we'll
that's pending good behavior.
I did say minimum, all right.
Let's be honest here. He might screw that up in 3 months. You never know.
You never know. You never know. So Chris Jericho obviously discusses AEW possible expansion into New Japan. We've seen obviously the New Japan partnership. Is this good business move in a way?
Now, I didn't hear this. What exactly does he mean expansion into New Japan? Like just more wrestlers going to Japan and wrestling, or like them buying New Japan? What is he talking about?
So Jericho said the emphasis is on the growth of the organization itself and in how much of an impact we can make. That's why we gather the best wrestlers from all over the world. In terms of growth, we recently had 81,000 people at Wembley Stadium in London, England. I think it's a natural for AEW to come to Japan since we have our expansion outside of Japan in mind. And I think that something like AEW Raid on DDT or New Japan will happen in the future.
Oh, okay. So basically just kind of some more co-promotion and involvement. I think it could only help. I think it could. I mean, a lot of the fan base that would watch New Japan are the fans that would watch AEW. So I think any kind of expansion into Japan would definitely help AEW. I'm not sure how receptive New Japan would be to putting over AEW talent. I don't know about that. I mean, I don't think they have much of a problem coming here and doing it, but I don't know if they're going to want to do it there on the mainland. But we'll see. I want to see more involvement. I don't know if we're talking about it or not, but I saw that Danielson challenged Okada for Wrestle Kingdom, and yeah, so which I think will be infinitely better than their Forbidden Door match by far, because Okada just works better in Japan. Like he's just kind of a fish out of water in the US, it seems like. But yeah, I think it could only benefit them.
What about obviously DDT? Because obviously this is a promotion which I've seen bits of, and I'm kind of curious if this actually works. This little partnership here.
DDT looks absolutely stupid. Like, I'm sorry, but they do the dumbest shit I've ever seen. Like, I've seen clips of them having blown up dinosaurs wrestling and wrestling blow up sex dolls and children being involved, not with the sex dolls, but just in matches. I got to make that distinction clear for anybody out there. But yeah, it just looks stupid. Like for anything I've seen of it, it just looks like total garbage. So I think they should stick with New Japan and less DDT.
Okay, we shall definitely obviously see on that one. So this obviously report we've also CM Punk going to TNA. It doesn't seem to be leaving. It's still obviously you see reports through it all the time. And Scott D'Amore has also said the door is open. Now obviously we're talking about TNA. We said for quite a few times on the money side, I think this will be a bad move all around.
Yeah. They're not going to benefit. I mean, they would benefit in terms if they would get a little bit of a pop and interest. But I just don't think they're going to make a return on their investment if they hire Punk for what he's going to want. You know, Punk's going to want $1 million plus. Can Impact afford to pay anybody $1 million plus? Like, really?
Possibly.
I doubt it. Like I said, I mean, Anthem could kick in extra money, but that gets problematic. And we'll talk about this because this is one of my talking points later in the highs and lows of TNA. You can kick more money in, but if you're not going to get a solid return on that investment, you're just pissing money down the drain. And I think if they pay Punk $1 million, that's what's going to happen, because I don't think they're going to get that back. I think they're going to end up spending more than they take in, even with Punk. I just don't think it's going to happen. I mean, I'd be highly surprised if it did happen. It would be a very short term, like 1 or 2 matches, I think.
Yeah, it would be more like I don't see it be any more than that. So, got a little side note here. Obviously, TNA has obviously signed 2 good talent, obviously from the UK. That is Leon Slater and Harley Hudson. Now, Harley Hudson won. Do you remember the gut check thing?
Yeah, I do remember.
Now,
that.
So obviously, in the last week they did the gut check, and Harley obviously went on and win it. So now she obviously works for TNA. And Leon Slater, and the reason obviously I want to bring this up is every single person, obviously, who I've interviewed throughout the UK, every single person said Leon's going to make it. And he's obviously now signed to the TNA, and I wish them both nothing but the best.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'll check them out, and hopefully they succeed and do really well. And maybe if things go really well with Impact, if TNA starts getting better or starts getting more notoriety, they'll get more fame and success, and who knows what the future holds for them.
Of course, of course. So another little thing is, obviously, you just mentioned Crown Jewel. So from everything you've watched so far, good show overall?
Yeah. I mean, there's been 2 matches so far. I think they've both been pretty good. The Raw Women's Championship match is just starting now. Of course, they all got their full body suits on, look like they're going scuba diving or something. But yeah, Rhea Ripley's coming out right now. She had kind of a cool entrance with a bunch of green smoke and fog and stuff. But yeah, the Seth Rollins and McIntyre match, that was a banger. And JD McDonough and Sami Zayn was pretty good too.
There you go. So I've seen some of the cards. So are you looking forward to some matches coming up on the show?
I mean, I'm a little indifferent. I mean, honestly, I want to see what they do with Roman Reigns and LA Knight. I mean, I'm sure Reigns is probably going to go over, but I'm curious to see if they're going to have some continuation here where they're going to, match up again down the road. It would be awesome if they put the belt on LA Knight. I don't think they're going to, but it would pop me if they did.
Yeah, definitely would, but I don't see it. I mean, I'd love to see it. Obviously, LA Knight's well over, obviously, with the fans, but I don't know, man. I mean, I still cannot think who's going to dethrone him.
Yeah, there's all kinds of kind of rumors going around now about how like his body's taking a toll on him, and is he going to continue wrestling much longer? And he's getting a lot more infrequent in his title defenses. I don't know, man. I think if I had to be a betting man, they'll have him hold out till next year at Mania and then maybe drop to whoever. I don't know who that would be. I don't know if it'd be LA Knight. I don't know if it'd be Cody. I don't know. But I think maybe after Mania, we might see a lot less of Roman Reigns moving forward.
Interesting. We shall definitely obviously see on that one. I mean, when's Mania? Is it still a few months? It's way away anyway, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be it's usually like late March or early April. So, yeah, we still got a ways away.
Okay, that's fine. So, yeah, that obviously wraps up the Magic Weekly. We've got loads to get into our main event. Ready to do this?
Let's do it, man.
It's main event time.
The main event.
I still forgot the quarter.
I don't have any quarters on my desk either.
Damn it. Now, of course, the main event is brought to you by the Kill City Cup. How can I describe the Kill City Cup? Let's say Mortal Kombat meets wrestling, and I'm just going to play the video and let you guys check it out.
Welcome to the Kill City Cup.
Right by the balls.
Of course, we're doing Impact Wrestling today. Now, this highs and lows thing has been a really obviously big success for us all. Now, obviously, when it comes to what was your first introduction, obviously, to Impact?
The first time that I remember watching Impact, I'd seen clips of it during the Asylum days, which was the early days in Nashville when they used to run weekly pay-per-views before Impact became a show. And then when they created TNA Impact on Fox Sports here in the US, it aired literally at like 5 o'clock in the afternoon on like Wednesdays or something like that. That was the first time that I actually really watched TNA. So this is probably about 2004 was when I started watching it.
Yeah, so if I remember rightly, the history of it goes, there was it a partnership with NWA because it was known as NWA Total Nonstop Action?
Yeah. It started out being basically an NWA affiliated territory when it first started. So those first couple of years, well, first probably 3 or 4 years, the NWA 10 pounds of gold heavyweight championship was the title belt in TNA. The first of which being Ken Shamrock.
Of all people.
Former WWE wrestler / MMA UFC legend. He was the first NWA TNA World Heavyweight Champion on their first event.
Wow, yeah, interesting. Obviously, when we look back for everything that TNA has been going on, yeah, they've had some great things, but they've also had some really, really bad things as well, let's be honest.
They did. Yeah. I mean, TNA's had a lot of follies over the years. They've had a lot of great moments, but they've had a lot of follies. And when I sat down to put my list together, I started putting the list together and I was like, well, hold on. There's like way more lows here on my list than highs. So I had to go back and kind of counterbalance. Okay, so what are the things I liked from TNA? Because I really was a big fan of TNA back in the mid to late 2000s. Which we'll get into more detail as we go over some of these. But yeah, TNA had a lot of follies, man. they had a lot of hiccups. They had a lot of missed opportunities. And we'll go over those.
Yeah, I think this is probably one of these where we could easily do a part 2 because there's just so much to uncover.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the damn thing's still going.
There you go.
They didn't die or anything. They're still going. So there will definitely be some future episodes in some regard about TNA.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we obviously get into this list, now, obviously they were announced recently they've gone back to the old TNA name. I've got to be honest, when I read this, I got super excited because I always remember it just as TNA. I've never even said Impact, even when they're known as Impact.
Yeah. I mean, I think they should have stayed TNA the entire time. I do, because that's what they built their identity on. I understand why they changed it. We'll get into more about why they changed it, in our talking points of the items we have on our list. But yeah, I think they should have stayed TNA from the get-go. TNA has a lot of cachet with pro wrestling fans, and TNA had a pretty solid following throughout the United States here. And I know they did over in the UK as well. They had some big UK shows back in like the early 2010s, I remember. So much so that they even thought about completely relocating to England. I remember that.
Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, that they had some big moments here, and I'm excited to kind of get into them.
Absolutely. So for people obviously who's followed this series, what we do is we take 10 talking points through the career, obviously, of Impact. And we just basically discuss them. We have to decide if it's a high or a low. Sometimes there may be neutrals, and if we get time at the end, people in the comments can throw some at us. So, Mr. Isaacs, kick us off.
Yeah, so here's the first one that I have here, and it kind of chronologically, it's kind of one of the earlier points here. And when TNA first started, so let's just go back to the very beginning here. Jeff Jarrett had the idea, once WCW went under, of kind of reestablishing an old school, traditional, Southern American style professional wrestling company, which is what WCW was always perceived to be, at least in the earlier days. It kind of lost that focus towards the end of it. That NWA lineage of professional wrestling. So he approached his father, Jerry Jarrett, who was a multimillionaire. He owned a construction company, and he was also the guy who was behind Memphis Wrestling. Very successful wrestling booker, one of the most important wrestling bookers of all time. So he convinced his father, Jerry, to go in with him and create NWA TNA to kind of fill that void of WCW. And those early TNA shows under the NWA TNA banner were done in Nashville, Tennessee, which is kind of the cultural hub of the South of the United States. And they ran this place called the Asylum, which was like the Tennessee State Fairgrounds in Nashville, Tennessee. They called it the Asylum when they ran shows there. And that's where they did all of their early pay-per-view shows. Now, the way TNA was set up from the get-go was they did weekly pay-per-views because they didn't have television. So the Jarretts got together. They brought Vince Russo in to write the program. Very questionable call. I think Jeff and Jerry kind of squabbled over that because Jerry wanted to just do old school booking, but Jeff wanted to use a writer. So that caused a little bit of dissension there. But, Vince Russo came in and they were booking weekly pay-per-views for like $5 a week American. Because I remember my buddy Tim. Some of you might remember I talked to him. He was the guy who's the dad of the kid that met MJF and had the viral photo that I interviewed on this channel a few months back. He used to get them. And I think I even watched one or two of them with him way back when this first started. But yeah, they ran weekly pay-per-views from the Asylum. Well, eventually, whenever Panda Energy came in, which was the Carter family, billionaire oil tycoons from Texas, and their daughter Dixie Carter came in and ended up purchasing the company from the Jarretts. And when they did that, they moved the television tapings from the Asylum to what became known as the Impact Zone. Now, most people recognize the Impact Zone. It's been kind of an iconic space over the years, with people making jokes about what's fill in the blank doing in the Impact Zone. That kind of became like a meme that everybody was using for everybody that would leave WWE. It was at Universal Studios in Orlando, Florida. It was a television soundstage. And they ended up shifting the shows from the Asylum in Nashville to Orlando, Florida, Universal Studios to the Impact Zone. Now, Liam, do you think that this move, and I'll give you my detailed response, but I'm curious to see what you think first. Do you think this move was a high or a low for TNA?
For me personally, because I didn't watch it from the beginning, obviously, with the Asylum. Obviously, I saw it like midway before they went to the Impact Zone, but I absolutely loved the Asylum. I felt like, because if I remember right, there was two entrances, one on one side, one on the other. If I remember right, is that right?
In the Impact Zone, yes. Yeah, so, they had two ramps.
Yeah, but the Asylum, I thought it was great. I mean, great. The thing is now, when I think about it, the Impact Zone, it's the sound. It's like a sound. The sound's so horrible for me personally. I mean, so yeah, for me personally, it has to be a low because it's like I just do not like the Impact Zone at all. There's just something about when you watch the product, especially on TV as well.
Yeah, and for me, I 100% agree with that. I think that this was a low, and I'll give you the reasons why. For one thing, I think the company should have been. I think they should have stayed with their base in Nashville. Nashville, like I said, is the cultural hub of the United States of the South. It's kind of smack in the middle of the country. It's a lot more accessible to wrestling fans, whereas Orlando, Florida is literally in southern Florida, the southernmost tip of the United States. So unless you just happen to take a vacation and drive 20 hours to Florida from middle America, you're probably not going to go to a TNA show. So I think that kind of cut the accessibility as far as in person. It cut off a lot of fans from attending the shows. And my understanding was when they went to Universal Studios is a theme park. I don't know if you're familiar with it or not, but it's like a Disney World competitor in Orlando. It's a small theme park where Universal movies all have like rides and stuff there. So it's an amusement park, like a small Disney World. But this is where they did Impact, and a lot of the people that would come in to watch Impact knew absolutely jack shit about professional wrestling. They were just people who went to the park to ride the roller coasters, and somebody outside, literally Jimmy Hart, would go outside with his megaphone and try to convince people in the park to come to TNA Impact recordings. So they would get people that weren't even really fans of professional wrestling. So if you watch a lot of TNA from like the mid 2000s, a lot of people in the crowd are just sitting on their hands dead because it's like they have no reaction. They don't know what the hell's going on. They just know some guy was barking at them saying, hey, you can come watch wrestling here. All right, let's take a few minutes and go check this wrestling stuff out. And I think that really kind of took away from the aesthetic of the product. You know, it was a small sound stage. It felt like a small time production with a crowd that, you know, was about split, you know, maybe 75 hardcore wrestling fans and 25% people that don't know what the hell's going on. And I just think that that kind of hurt a little bit. I liked the feel and the look and the location of the Asylum. I thought that did a better job than relocating to the Impact Zone. So I'm going to say it's a low.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. Low completely. Whether it's why they went to the Impact Zone for me is still one of the biggest, like, questionable things for me. But that's why we're here, right?
It had to be cheaper, I would assume. I mean, I would assume that it had to be a monetary reason.
Yeah, it's definitely something. Now, that kind of links obviously into my next one, obviously. So I've gone for losing the Spike TV deal. Now, in preparation for obviously doing this, I remember listening to an interview with Angelina Love with, I think it was Inside the Ropes. And she said that one of the reasons why they actually lost the Spike TV deal was because of one certain Dixie Carter. Apparently, she was wanting double as what they were offering. And then when they eventually nearly pulled out, apparently Dixie's like, oh, no. Oh, it's fine. We'll go off. But then by then, the damage is already done. But if I remember rightly, Spike was paying for all the big names at the time.
Yeah, my understanding was that Spike was literally bankrolling Hulk Hogan's salary. Like, I think they were covering it pretty much entirely from what I remember the reports saying at the time. Yeah, that's just losing Spike was devastating for TNA. And TNA, in my opinion, has never recovered from losing that Spike deal because they went to a small channel called Destination America, just this god awful travel channel that like 50 people have. That was awful. They left Destination America and they went to some other channel. I don't even remember what the channel was called. I really
Pop
don't.
TV.
What was it?
Pop TV.
Oh, yes, Pop TV, which I think doesn't even exist anymore. I think that channel literally died. But they went to Pop TV and went to even more obscurity until they eventually were purchased by Anthem, who owns Access TV, and put them on there, which is still in obscurity because nobody watches Access TV. So I think losing the Spike deal was huge for TNA. It is a definite lowest of low.
Absolutely. I feel like this is probably one where it all started to go downhill because you're talking about one of the biggest like TV. I don't know if Spike's still not going now, are they?
Spike rebranded to the Paramount Network a few years back, but they still exist just under a different name.
Yeah, so I mean, like I said, you're talking about one of the biggest like TV companies going, and to lose that is probably this one of the biggest. Yeah, for me, absolutely the lowest of the low.
Yeah, it's the lowest thing on this list, in my opinion. Like, if TNA still had this deal, if they were still on the Paramount Network and had never lost the deal, they would be in much better shape today.
Absolutely. So that's two lows. Can we get any better?
I think we got a couple in here that are going to be highs, but we do have several lows. But let's go ahead and discuss this next one because I can see this kind of going both ways. The next one on my list was Hogan and Eric Bischoff coming in and being given the reins, essentially full control of TNA. Now, one big thing that Dixie Carter and Spike TV wanted to do was they wanted to try to take TNA to the next level and compete with the WWE. So what they did was they went out and they got Hulk Hogan and they got Eric Bischoff, which I think Hogan insisted that Bischoff come too. And decided that, we're going to try to recreate the Monday Night Wars and bring in Hogan and Eric Bischoff, have WCW 2.0, and we're going to go up against the WWE. So they brought in Hogan and they brought in Bischoff and paid him a shit ton of money. They came in. They controversially got rid of the 6-sided ring and just brought back a traditional 4-sided ring, which I think we've had discussions. I think we discussed this a bit in detail on the highs and lows of Eric Bischoff about how it kind of stripped TNA's identity a little bit. It went from being TNA to being WWE Light, essentially. A lot of sports entertainment elements were brought in. The Nasty Boys showed up, Val Venus showed up, just all kinds of relics from the past. That
Bubba the Love Sponge.
Bubba the Love Sponge showed up. He was there for a while till he got punched by Awesome Kong. Which I always used to like Bubba's radio show. But I mean, I don't think he really belonged there. He was there because he was Hogan's friend, of course. They're no longer friends. You can Google why that is if you wish to know. But yeah, this I think it was a low. Now, I can see people saying it's a high because it spiked ratings. TNA got the highest television ratings they've ever had during this era. But I think the long-term damage that the changes made and the chaos of them ended up fizzling out and leaving, I think left the company in worse shape. So I could see it being kind of a short-term high, but a long-term net low. So I'm going to say it's a low. What do you think, Liam?
So my understanding, obviously, with Eric Bischoff coming into TNA, I do believe it was apparently, this is his quotes, by the way, is he was only hired to look over Hulk's creative because the Hulk was in a lot of medical trouble. I think that was my understanding with that. But thing is, when I think about the Hogan and Eric tenure, there was some good stuff. Do you know what I mean? I mean, the Immortal thing, I did kind of like it. I'm not going to say I hated it. So there was some good parts I enjoyed. There was some bad parts. I fully agree with what you said with the 6-sided ring. I feel like once you strip that, your identity is gone. And we saw, I don't mind Hulk Hogan. The ratings obviously was there. So overall, I'm going to have to go straight down the middle. I'm going to say it's a neutral because there is some good parts, but there's also some bad parts.
Did you enjoy the Brooke Hogan getting married to Bubba Ray Dudley and then Bully Ray turning on her? Did you like that storyline?
I've got to be honest. That actually, yeah, I did. I'm not going to lie.
It was kind of entertaining. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I mean, look, there were some good parts to the Hogan Bischoff era of TNA. I agree with you on that. There were definitely some good parts. I do think they strayed away too much from TNA's identity, but I got to give credit where it's due. There were some decent things, and the ratings did spike pretty large. They got better ratings during this. I mean, they got significantly higher viewership during this time than AEW gets now. To put that to perspective, AEW gets about 800,000 viewers. I think during this era, TNA was at about 1.5 million. So, I mean, that's like significantly higher than current AEW. And it's almost as high as current Monday Night Raw, which gets about 2 million viewers. So it's nothing to shake a stick at, man. Like, you have to see a little bit of success here. So I can understand where you're coming from with that.
Yeah, this is probably going to be one of those on the entire list where people's going to have mixed feelings, which is obviously fine. This is obviously only part of the show, which I mean, everybody can have their own opinions on it. But yeah, I'm definitely sticking with neutral on that. You said it's a low, so that's definitely an interesting one. This next one is probably the most talked about for me. When I obviously said we were doing highs and lows, this was the first thing I put on, and it's of course losing AJ Styles. Now, the interesting thing is, when I think of TNA, my first wrestler I think of is AJ. Some great matches, great in the ring, and I feel like losing a star quality man like that definitely hurt him.
Yeah, AJ Styles, this is a definite low. I'll just spoiler alert, I'll just throw that out up front. But AJ Styles' career in TNA is definitely a high. Um, he's one of those guys that just became synonymous with the TNA brand. Like if you put together a Mount Rushmore of TNA, I think AJ Styles would have to be one of the four. I think absolutely he would. Because he just became synonymous with the brand. To me, when I thought about TNA, and I mean, obviously, you think of like the WWE cast offs, Sting, Kurt Angle, Booker T, Mick Foley, Kevin Nash, on and on and on and on. But if you think about homegrown, like they didn't start there, but they kind of became names in TNA. I always thought of AJ Styles and Samoa Joe. Like that's always who I thought of. Arguably, they both made pretty good names in Ring of Honor before that as well. But on a national stage, people really didn't see them until they went to TNA, and they were huge. I mean, AJ Styles, some of the greatest wrestling matches you're going to see of the past 2 decades were AJ Styles and TNA. I mean, just go back and watch it. He had barn burner matches with Samoa Joe, Kurt Angle, Sting. I mean, he was absolutely amazing. And then when the Hogan Bischoff era came in, kind of bringing it full circle, he started getting saddled with a bunch of bullshit of pretending to be Ric Flair. And then, he had the Claire Lynch storyline. Oh my God. And when he left TNA and he reinvented himself and became a big Ring of Honor guy and became the leader of the Bullet Club in New Japan and was the IWGP World Champion. He reinvented himself to be a much bigger, better version of what he was in TNA in years prior. So I think this was a major misstep and low for TNA.
Yeah, absolutely. But I just want to obviously balance this out a little bit because I do believe there was obviously certain factors which played out with this. Obviously, the financial side's a key one. But I mean, I remember Jeff Jarrett, and obviously we'll get onto him later on, where he said that I would have rather not been paid if it meant keeping AJ. Do you know what I mean? And I thought, do you know what? That kind of, I've got respect for that. But yeah, I mean, it is a big, massive low. But like I said, if there's certain factors playing out, you can't really do much, let's be honest.
I mean, business is business. Like it's not like just Dixie Carter didn't just roll out of bed and say, you know what, screw AJ Styles. I don't want the bastard anymore. Like it's just business here. Like if you don't come to terms on what's best for all parties involved, then you really have no alternative but to dissolve the union and go your separate ways. That's just business, and that's what happened here.
Absolutely. So yeah, I think we're both in agreement on that. That's a low. So we're actually moving quite quickly on me. So Mr. Isaac, back to you.
Well, we're going to get to something here with my next one that I feel is a definite high, and I think you're going to agree with me. And it is the TNA Wrestling X Division. Now, the X Division really, to me, the X Division set the standard for what non-WWE American wrestling is, even to this day. I think the roots of it could be found in the WCW Cruiserweight division with elements of ECW spliced in. TNA is kind of the next evolution of that. The X Division was kind of the next evolution of that WCW Cruiserweight / ECW style, cultivated for a mainstream American audience. The X Division was absolutely great. And it didn't have a weight limit. It wasn't a cruiserweight division, but it kind of was a de facto cruiserweight division. But that way you could make it to where bigger guys could be involved. And it was basically just guys that were very athletic. We saw kind of the flippy dippy style come in here, but I will say that they did it with a lot more psychology than wrestlers do today. 100%. You watch Christopher Daniels against, some Sanjay Dutt or somebody like that from TNA. They do the big moves, but they sell their ass off and they tell a story. And it's just so much better than a lot of guys do it today. So for me, and the legacy that the X Division left on wrestling today, I think the X Division was a high.
1000% agree there. This is probably one of the reasons I actually tuned into Impact, because this one of my favorite matches in TNA, which doesn't get a lot of love, is obviously the Ultimate X match.
Oh yeah, those Ultimate X matches were crazy. Explain to everybody out there that might not know what that was.
So it's I don't know. It's basically where like there's an X in the middle of the ring. It's on like is it like a lighting grid or something like that? Is that the fair assumption?
Yeah, I mean, so essentially, think about it in terms like this: it's a ladder match without ladders.
Mhm.
So they would suspend the title belt in the air, and there would be like two cables in the form of an X over the ring and the 6-sided ring, and the belt would be hanging from the middle of that. And you had to literally, like, you're on the jungle gym, you'd have to like climb the cables over to the middle, jump and grab the title belt. I mean, it just, the athleticism that was required to put on a match like that was just insane. But it was a cool concept. I mean, I loved it.
Joseph Graham says the X Division roster could be its own company. That's how good it was.
Yes.
Yeah, I have to agree, and I think you're kind of on point there. This X Division as a whole obviously paved the way for other companies. Now we call it the cruiserweight, but it's still the same styles, high flying and stuff like that. So for me, this is absolutely one of the biggest highs for TNA. Let's be honest.
Yeah. I mean, this was the identity. This was the heart and soul of TNA as a wrestling promotion.
Absolutely. So anybody who obviously does not follow TNA, go check out X Division, one of the best.
Yep.
Right. So the one person we've obviously mentioned a lot in this 40 odd minutes is Dixie Carter, which is kind of ironic because that's next on my list. Dixie Carter. Now, I'm just going to start this by saying if you go on YouTube, there is a plethora of videos called Carter Clangers. Now, these are silly stuff she's done throughout the whole career. We could do a whole hour just based on that alone, but I don't even know where to begin. There's just so many silly things she did. And I'm not knocking her. I feel like at the minute it was more based that she didn't understand the wrestling thingy, which is fine. One person once said to me, you can easily get swallowed up in wrestling. But when I think back to all the stupid things she's done, it's got to be a low for me, I'm afraid.
Yeah. This is one of those things that, again, I kind of think was beneficial in the short term because her and her family's money kept the company afloat.
Mm-hmm.
Like if the Jarretts hadn't sold to Panda Energy, they might have just folded at that point, and that would have been the end of it. So the Carter's money kept this thing going. But with that said, and God bless her, I think Dixie Carter's a nice lady. And I think she really did have a love and a passion. Even though she didn't grow up watching wrestling, you could tell she loved TNA. And she was passionate about it. And she was enthusiastic about it. And she tried her damnedest, but she was just in over her head. I mean, she was a public relations woman. That's how she got to know the Jarretts. She did PR work for them. And then she was just like, hey, my father's a billionaire. What if I buy your company and we run it together? Essentially is what happened. And I mean, again, God bless her. She tried, but, she kept the company afloat. It would have died without her. And for that reason alone, I'm going to barely by the skin of my teeth say that her buying the company was a high, because I don't think it would be here today if she hadn't bought it.
This is the first one where me and you were going to have to disagree, I'm afraid. For me, weighing everything up, yes, I understand where you're coming from. So obviously, she bought the company. TNA wouldn't be here if it wasn't for her. But when I look back to everything I've read about what's gone off with Dixie, I mean, she probably is a nice lady. I'm not knocking her. I just want to put that out. But the amount of stuff that she did silly, for me, it has to be a low. So unfortunately, this is one where we're going to have to disagree.
So you think it would have been better if the company died?
I mean, we can't sit here and say the company would have died. I mean, somebody could have bought it. We don't know. Do you know what I mean? In the moment.
I suppose that's possible. Yeah, yeah. I mean that if Dixie Carter hadn't bought it, maybe the Jarretts could have sold it to somebody else. Who knows? But and I get what you're saying. Yeah, I'm just giving you a hard time with that. But yeah, I get what you're saying. Dixie did not know shit about wrestling, and it showed. And there's a lot of stories out there from guys like Cornette and Bruce Pritchard, and even though this might be pot meat kettle, Vince Russo. A lot of people are like, at Bischoff, a lot of people are like, Dixie's the nicest lady in the world. She did not know shit about professional wrestling.
Yeah, and one of my worst things in TNA is when she put herself on TV. Did not like one bit of it. The Dixieland thing was really stupid. So
I was going to say, you had to give it up. You had to love the Dixieland song, right?
No, I did not. The best thing out of that actual thing is when Bully Ray fucking powerbombed her through a table.
Yeah. That was pretty funny. Yeah. I'm not a huge Bully Ray guy, but I did think that was funny though.
So, right, we've got 4 more left. Back to you.
All right, let me get my list up here. All right, so here's the next one on mine, and we're going to kind of go back in a little bit of a positive direction here, because I gave Dixie a net high, but it was like really on the cusp of just being middle ground for me. But this one I think was a definite high because I don't think TNA would have been where it was without these two men, and it is bringing in Sting and Kurt Angle to TNA Wrestling now. I don't think TNA would have been able to get a television deal post Asylum if they hadn't brought Sting in. If Sting hadn't come in and television advertisers knew who he was because they knew he was from WCW, I don't think that TNA would have got a television deal, and they probably would have died, honestly. And I think when Kurt Angle came in, it generated a lot of buzz too. Not quite as much as Sting, but shortly after Sting came in, Angle came in. And I'm going to give up a hot take, probably unpopular opinion here. I like TNA Kurt Angle so much better than WWE Kurt Angle. I just do. I think some of his best work, character-wise, was in TNA. I like the badass shooter Kurt Angle. I didn't like the goofy, I drink milk and, prance around with a gold medal Kurt Angle from WWE. I did not like that. I liked mean Kurt Angle. I like mean, hoodie over my head, coming out to rap music, and just tearing people up and using MMA moves. Like, I like that Kurt Angle, the intense Kurt Angle. And I think he was better in TNA than WWE. And I think that Sting and Kurt Angle brought this company to prominence in the mid to late 2000s. So it's a definite high for me. What do you think?
So Joseph Graham says first, I agree with you on the Angle, Mr. Isaacs. And do you know what? I think we're all in agreement here. I absolutely love Kurt Angle in TNA. One of my favorite debuts, obviously, in TNA is Kurt Angle because I just remember, I think it was Don West's reaction was absolutely terrific.
Oh, I love Don West. Like, let's give it up for the late Don West. Most people who come into pro wrestling as commentators, I'm looking at you, Alex Marvez and Kevin Patrick, and all these people that don't know shit about wrestling. They suck. They're garbage. Don West came in not knowing anything about wrestling, learned everything that he could about it, and was absolutely a phenomenal storyteller on the air. So, but yeah, not to cut you off and sidetrack you with that, but yes, I agree with you.
Yeah, the thing is, when I was some of my favorite moments from TNA is the Kurt Angle thing. I mean, a lot of people don't like the main event mafia type thing, the original one, but I kind of do. I think Kurt Angle played it really well there. The feud he had with Jarrett, which was obviously later on, that's another one. And Sting, I mean, this might be an unpopular opinion from me, but I really enjoyed the Joker Sting. I know we've said this before.
Yeah, I know you're a big fan of the Joker Sting. Yeah. I mean, he did do a good job with it. Not personally my cup of tea, but, I guess I'm just a longtime follower of Sting, so I kind of prefer older Sting per se. But, yeah, Sting and Kurt Angle, man, like without the two of them, I don't think we'd be sitting here talking about TNA much today. I think it'd be one of those things like, yeah, they were good in 2005, and then when they died in 2009, that was the end of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I think we're all in agreement here. It's got to be a high. I feel like these two played a pivotal part in the early days, and even Sting though, when obviously Impact was going through obviously the turmoil thing, which we'll get onto later. But yeah, for me, these two people are influential for in TNA, so I fully agree. A high.
So one last thing of note here. I remember there was one TNA pay-per-view I watched, I think in 2008, and the main event was Sting versus AJ Styles, and probably one of my favorite Sting matches ever of all time. It was amazing. The fans were chanting "This is wrestling" because it was just such a banger. I mean, it was so great. Like, I really miss this era of TNA.
Definitely. So yeah, we're all in agreement to that. So, Mr. Is it my go now? Is it yours?
It is yours because that last one was mine.
Okay, so obviously we announced obviously in the news that they're going back to TNA in January. So this kind of leads into this one because it's rebrand after rebrand after rebrand after rebrand. I just want to start this by saying I'm not against a rebrand thing, but some of the rebrands here, for me personally, are really, really questionable. Like when I remember Mick Foley coming out saying it's going to Impact because wrestling matters. The Global Force one, which we'll obviously discuss, but I will be honest, this is one where I'm really, really torn because some of the rebrands I did like, but some of them I didn't.
Yeah. I think the problem is that when you rebrand, you kind of strip away some identity each time you rebrand. And that goes with anything, not just a wrestling company. Like if Coca-Cola changed their name to, Papa Cola or something like that, it would strip away a little bit of legacy. Like when you change a name, you're making it seem like it's fresh, but it doesn't have the nostalgia anymore. It doesn't have the same cachet. And this company went from NWA TNA to TNA to Impact Wrestling to Global Force Wrestling, back to Impact Wrestling, and now back to TNA. Now, that to somebody who's not a wrestling fan, like you would literally think that was like 4 different companies. So I think that the brand confusion, it's got to be a low. Like I think they should have been TNA from the start, and they should have stayed TNA. I know they switched it to Impact during the Hogan era because they said that they were having problems getting potential advertisers to agree to it because of the TNA brand. Which, do you know the story of how it became TNA?
I do not.
So Vince Russo created the term TNA, and he obviously meant TNA, like a part of a woman's body that you refer to as TNA. But somebody, I think, freaked out and said, well, we can't market that. We can't call a wrestling company that. And said that he just off the top of his head, well, why don't we call it Total Nonstop Action, bro? So, like, he literally just came up with that to bullshit and make it like he meant something different. But Vince Russo is actually the guy that came up with the initials TNA.
Interesting. I did not know that. But yeah, I mean, like as I mentioned earlier, I'm not against rebrands, but sometimes when you rebrand, I feel like because they were constantly moving, from channel to channel, they're trying to like affiliate to that channel. So I'm gonna have to say this is another neutral one for me because some of the stuff under that brand I didn't actually like. I mean, I've just enjoyed.
What, you mean you didn't like Global Force?
No, I didn't, and I will. If you come on the show, I will tell you I didn't like it.
It was too much green in the aesthetic, right? Like everything turned to green and black then instead of blue and black.
Yeah, I just did not like. Well, to be fair, did it even get going?
Well, it was this weird thing where like. This is going to be a little bit of a sidetrack, but it was this weird thing where like Jarrett was wanting to come back to the company and was wanting to buy Impact. and he wanted to merge it into his company he founded, Global Force. And then he had another falling out with the Carters, which we'll get to because that's the last thing on my list. And they ended up just reverting back to Impact out of nowhere. And then I guess we could get into, well, Billy Corgan came in and was the head of creative of Impact and wanted to purchase Impact. And then he had a falling out with the Carters, and then he disappeared. And it was just so weird. Like, you know, Impact, Global Force, Impact. It's like, what the hell is going on here? Like, it was so confusing and nobody knew what was going on.
Yes, it's definitely one of those. So you've said it's a low, I said it's a neutral. So one more left on your list.
All right. So the next one, the last one that I have on my list is the aforementioned Jeff Jarrett being removed from Power. Now, TNA obviously was the brainchild of Jeff Jarrett and his father, Jerry Jarrett. And there were some issues with Jeff Jarrett and the Carters. And some people say, I'm sure, you know, the power struggle was part of it too, but some people say that Jeff's involvement with Karen, the former Karen Angle that became Karen Jarrett, it caused too many issues between Jeff and Kurt, and Dixie sided with Kurt because he was a bigger name. So I understand that as well. I do think that once Jeff Jarrett left, the direction of the company really kind of faltered at that point. Because then it was Dixie was running the show, you know, with Vince Russo and Bruce Pritchard. And without Jarrett there to kind of have the old school wrestling booking mentality, it just kind of went to hell. And then that's when they, you know, kind of scrambled to figure out what to do and brought in Hogan and Bischoff. And then it just, you know, that whole thing happened afterwards. I think that Jeff was the brainchild of TNA. And without him being involved, I think that the company, at least creatively, suffered for it. And I think they still feel the effects of that to this day. I think removing Jeff from Power, to me, was a net low. What about you?
Interesting. So, I mean, I didn't know obviously that she sided with Kurt, so that's kind of new to me. But I mean, you're talking about Jeff, obviously Jeff Jarrett, who's like dad is obviously one of the best bookers, you know, going. So if you're talking knowledge power, Jeff obviously is going to be up there because obviously he's got his dad to lean on. But I don't. Is it a bad business? A bad business decision? Obviously siding with Kurt. Really, is that basically what we're saying here?
Not necessarily. I think it was a bad business decision to not sit them down and say, hey, we need to keep making money together. Kurt's the biggest star we have, but Jeff is the wrestling mind that kind of creatively drives the program. We need to sit down in a room and figure out how to make this work and make money. Like, I think that that's what should have happened. The same thing that I would say about how I think Tony Khan should have forced CM Punk and the Elite to sit down and say, look, we need to make some money off this shit. You all need to grow up. We're all millionaires. We need to go out there and make some damn money and put the name of AEW above any personal beef that you have. That's what I think Dixie Carter should have done with Kurt Angle and Jeff Jarrett.
Absolutely. I mean, I've got to be honest, I really enjoyed that little Jeff Jarrett and Kurt Angle feud. I'm not going to lie.
It was. I mean, it had a lot of realness to it.
And I think that I kind of like that type of thing when it becomes real, you know, like real life.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I love realism in storylines. It just, because you can tell they're not BSing. Like, it's not just kayfabe. It's like real beef. I love it.
Exactly. So, yeah, overall, I think it is going to be a low because, like I said, we saw what happened. But I think one thing I picked up, obviously, what you've just said there, it sounds like backstage there was a lot of power struggle. Would that be a fair comment based on what we've discussed so far?
Oh, absolutely. And if you hear guys like Bruce Pritchard and Eric Bischoff and Jim Cornette, Dutch Mantell, all guys who worked backstage in various managerial roles and producer roles, they all say the same thing. TNA was in a hell of a power struggle through like the late 2000s. And it caused a lot of problems, unfortunately.
Exactly. So we've got one more left on my list, and I do believe Joseph Graham's put one in the comments, which we've got time to discuss.
He
So
did. I could make the argument the biggest up for TNA is the Knockouts division. Now, I'm glad you brought that up, Joe, because I love the Knockouts division. And the Knockouts division, I think, much like the X division, was paramount to what women's wrestling is today because they moved away from the divas stuff that WWE was doing at the time. And they focused a lot more on actual in-ring wrestling. And it was women that didn't look like, I mean, they were good-looking women, but they looked like real women. They didn't look like plasticky supermodels. And they could work. Like Gail Kim was awesome. Awesome Kong was great. I mean, they had some great talents. The Beautiful People had a good run. I used to love them. So yeah, I mean, it was absolutely fantastic that they kind of changed women's wrestling and made it more about the actual wrestling and physicality in the ring and less about just good looks. So I think that's a really good point, Joe.
absolutely. The one thing obviously I want to add to obviously what Mr. Isaacs just said there. The one thing I like is we saw wrestlers obviously in WWE who didn't do as well, but yeah, when you put them onto TNA, I mean, you just said Gail Kim. The other one which I want to throw out there is obviously Mickie James as well.
Yeah, Mickie James. Absolutely. 100% agree. Like hardcore country Mickie James was better than anything she did in WWE. 100%. Absolutely agree.
So yeah, Joe, I'm so glad you've also brought that one up. So yeah, that's a definite high. And right, so I've got one more obviously to finish now. Where do we obviously we've covered a lot of stuff, TV deals, arenas, Eric Bischoff and Hogan, but I want to end honestly with a guy who's basically leading the reins now as we speak. And obviously we're talking about Scott D'Amore. I just want to start this by saying I've got so much respect for Scott D'Amore because Impact was in let's say a dark place. That's probably the best way we could put it. And to do as much as obviously he's done now, I mean, if anybody watches the product, I've watched it. The product's really good. Do you know what I mean? I'm not going to deny that. But I just feel like at the moment it's just the channel which I think hurts them more than anything. But I've got huge respect because everything he's done.
I think Scott D'Amore is a brilliant wrestling mind. I think he is. And my, people forget or might forget that Scott D'Amore was he was the mouthpiece of the heel faction Team Canada back in the mid 2000s, late 2000s era of TNA. And he was awesome. Like he cut some badass heel promos. Like the guy's good on the mic. He's got a good creative mind. He's been working for TNA/Impact off and on for a long time. So he's ingrained in the culture, knows the old school product. And I like the fact that he's running the newly rebranded TNA. I think he's a really good fit for that. Obviously he got in with the Anthem people and the Anthem people put him in charge. And I really, I don't think there's anybody better to lead that company forward. I really don't.
Absolutely. The one thing, obviously, again, I just want to add also what you've just said there. I remember listening to an interview when I think Scott obviously first was in charge, and somebody asked him, "What was the first thing you had to do?" Do you know, based on where TNA was? And he says, "Get the fans back on side." And I thought, do you know what? He's 100% right because the fans have been through hell, obviously in TNA. You try to stick with the product, and I think he does genuinely care about the fan base.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I said, he's one of those early personalities that, when I used to watch, when I first started watching TNA, Team Canada was a thing. And, he would come out with the guitar version of Oh Canada, come out with Petey Williams and all those guys. I think Eric Young was involved in it and some other people. And, cut promos on how Canada's better than the US and all this and that. I mean, he was just always so entertaining and so good on the mic. And I know he had a backstage producer role even back then. So, like, he's ingrained in TNA's history and culture and philosophy. And I hope he can take the rebranded TNA and, maybe, who knows, maybe the stars will align and he'll find some way to make the Punk deal happen. And it might be huge. Who knows? I'd love to see it, but I'm skeptical, but we'll see. I hope he does well.
Absolutely. So one final time, I mean, I'm going to kick this off. It's got to be a high because he went in obviously with TNA at an all-time low, and to me they're in the right direction. Let's be honest.
I think it's a high. Yeah. Now if they rebrand the TNA and they still kind of stay stagnant where they're at and they don't grow, I think we could go back retroactively and call it a low. But I think right now it's a high.
1000%. I fully agree there totally. So, one final question, obviously, before we end the show. Looking back now with everything what TNA has been through, how do you obviously remember TNA and basically moving forward?
I think that TNA was a continuation of the Southern lineage of American wrestling. I mean, that's kind of what their legacy was. And then that turned into kind of the modern day indie product with the X division. So to me, TNA filled the void of the second American wrestling promotion. When WCW went under, TNA was there to kind of scoop up a little bit of the remains. And it kept American wrestling afloat. Like if that had just been WWE for 20 years, I don't know. Would AEW be on the air? If TNA hadn't showed that you could be successful in the marketplace of American wrestling, would somebody have taken a chance on putting AEW on the air? I don't know. Maybe not. Like wrestling as we know it could literally just be WWE if TNA hadn't existed.
I think that's fair. I think that's a fair little comment. So for me, I mean, I think when it comes to TNA, there has been a lot of missed opportunities. Like one example is like capitalizing obviously on the UK scene. I feel like they could have, because I remember at the time Impact was absolutely huge over here, more so than obviously WWE. So yeah, there is obviously a lot of missed opportunities now, despite being through hell. I mean, that's probably the best way I could describe it. Do you know what I mean? They've come through everything. They're obviously still around, and I hope they do continue to succeed, because for me, wrestling needs competition. Do you know what I mean? Or alternatives.
100% it does. And I think that's true for any market. Any product, any service has to have some kind of competition, or else there's no drive, there's no initiation to innovate and do better. So I definitely think that there has to be competition. There has to be a solid, healthy marketplace, because monopolies don't work. When you monopolize a business, it suffers. The quality of it suffers. The customer experience suffers. I mean, that's just the laws of economics. And I think that does apply here to professional wrestling. You've got to have a competitor to WWE, or the whole damn thing might end up dying.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a lovely little thing to end on. And wow, I enjoyed this, you know what I mean? Because it's something I'm passionate about. It's a product, obviously, I've followed a while. So I'm so glad we've covered this one today.
Yeah, me too, man. Like it made me nostalgic to go back and think about old TNA. Like I loved it. And in the mid 2000s, I was the biggest TNA fan, and I would watch it over WWE 10 times out of 10. I loved it.
Absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, obviously TNA from January is obviously going back to their old name. And let's just see what the future holds. Maybe in a year's time, or a couple of years' time, we'll be looking back at this and like see where we're at.
Yeah, I'm game. Let's do it.
There you go. So, right. What we've got planned up for the rest of the week, I do believe Collision After Dark or The Garage is later.
The Garage will be later, at the usual time, right after the show ends, about 10 o'clock-ish Eastern Standard Time here in the Eastern Time Zone in the U.S. But yeah, Collision After Dark every Saturday night will be on.
Of course, and of course, the All Left in Wrestling show is tomorrow. I've completely forgot what show they're doing tomorrow, but go check that out at the usual time. And if you guys want to follow us on social media, you can head to prowrestlingtees.com/wrestling. Oh, that's for the shirts, by the way. You can get the Magic of Wrestling t-shirt, the new one, which I will be ordering at some point. The Effing Wrestling shirt, which is modeled by the lovely Natalia Markova. Oh, Mr. Isaacs, tell everybody about the old school.
If you love old school wrestling, and I know you do, you could go to prowrestlingtees.com/. Adrian Adonis. Get you an adorable Adrian Adonis t-shirt, who has been on a recent episode of the Vice documentary series Dark Side of the Ring. Now, Liam, I'm going to turn the tables on you a little bit. And I'm going to ask you to give the closing keep fighting statement, because I don't think I've ever heard you do it before.
Do I have to? Okay. Never mind.
Do you want me to do it?
Follow on social media. I'll do it in a second. Hang on. If you guys also want to follow us on social media, we're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, we're on Twitter, we're absolutely everywhere, right?
We are everywhere that you can find us, man. On all social media, you can find both of us on X. You know, X is gonna give it to you. Effing Magician, Mr. Isaacs. You can follow Effing Wrestling on there as well. Give us a follow. I probably need to be a little more active on X. I haven't tweeted or X'd or whatever the hell in a while. I need to get back to that again.
Go on. Do you know what? See us out to the outro, and I've got a little music little thing to play.
All right. Well, I will go ahead and just let everybody know we all have hard times in life, right? We've all got relationship problems. We got monetary problems. We got health problems. We got family problems, problems with school, whatever. You just got to remember that for every time you get knocked down, the important thing is that you get back up. I'll quote a little Rocky there for you. When you get knocked down, it's not about how hard you fall. It's about how you get back up. We can all do this. All of us. I believe in you. Liam believes in you. Canada Dry believes in you. Joe Graham believes in you. We all believe in you. JFB, everyone. We all believe in you. You just got to remember that you have the heart. You've got the strength in your soul deep down within to do this. You got to put your fist up in the air, guys. Just keep fighting.
Good night, everybody.